Now one of the next parts of our evil twin project is I want to take the donor bike, the spare GS1100, and remove the exhaust system and try to clean it up with the buffing wheel, clean it up as much as possible. It's still in pretty nice shape. So the last project we worked on was this seat. The seat came out great. May even get to ride this afternoon, but I wanted to take this. See, here's the thing with the exhaust system. These exhaust systems are for all practical purposes unobtainable, and when you do find one that has decent chrome, it costs more than what I paid for the bike. So what I'm going to do, I got my electric hoist, of course. What I wanted to do, and I thought this would be a good way to spend an hour or two today, I wanted to pull this exhaust system off, and then on the next rainy or snowy day, we're expecting some big snow, I'll have it downstairs and I can polish it up and put it in storage for, of course, what is the objective here. Now this bike has an exhaust system from an 86, which is not the politically correct exhaust system, and it's in decent shape, and it's that black chrome, but this is the one that belongs on the bike, and I do have if you look up on the rafters here, I do have a spare up there. So I'll have two spare exhausts that are usually unobtainable. For the motive here is at some future time I may want to rebuild this engine and have two of these. So that engine needs a crankshaft, but for right now, to pull the exhaust off and get that all polished up just like we have the carburetors downstairs, one more part of the evil twin project. Now without a lift, this is really an awkward job. I've done it before, of course. It's really awkward. With this electric lift, just makes it a little bit easier. And when you go to put it back on, if you don't have a helper, you better be an octopus. Now some of these are really difficult to get to, and in terms of when you want to get the wrench in there, you can only get a very small amount at a time, but it's just one of those things. You just have to be persistent. And I like to loosen up all of the bolts before I start. Now, whoever put this engine together put these on upside down. Again, this is a donor bike, so these are upside down, if you can see. Leads me to believe there might be some other stuff that's going to be a little awkward on this. Once you have the bolts off, these come right out, and these little shims come out, the half shims. And this is what gets to be a problem when you put it back together. But of course, before I would do anything, I'll wire brush and clean all these parts, have this all set to go. It's just a question of getting all of these bolts out. Now, of course, the guy that worked on this last, like I said, he didn't even Loctite these or anything. So this is going to be an easy one, I think. Now as I take these parts, I notice some of the bolts, they're really corroded, of course. Some of them are missing the proper lock washer. This one's missing a lock washer too. But once this is all cleaned up and wire brushed, and we'll have it in storage, we'll have a complete exhaust system. Now why is that important to me? Well, I owned this bike since it was brand new. I've enjoyed every one of the 44,000 miles that it has on it. And having a spare bike and spare parts that I don't have to buy off the internet from some unknown source, that's really worth the investment in time and energy. And what I try to do is any bike that I really plan to keep for the rest of my life, and of course that's a very limited amount of time, I really want to have my own part supply. And in this case, if you look over here, I do. I have a whole spare bike, spare engine, wheels, and spare parts. When you have old bikes, so worthwhile having a good inventory of spare parts. And the chrome on this exhaust is not terrible, but my plan is, once I get this off, is to really polish it all up on the buffing wheel, polish it, coat it with some good carnauba wax, and store it, put it in storage. Now, the other thing is, and I have these up here, I don't know if you can see them, I have several exhaust systems that are, for the RD, that are covered with wheel bearing grease and then wrapped in some kind of paper that protects them from rusting. And you never know. It's the funny thing with these bikes is you never know when you're going to need a spare part, and then you go out on eBay or somewhere, it's not available, or the guy wants $900 for the exhaust. These bikes to me, and this is just personal choice, if you put one of the modern 4-into-1 exhaust pipes on, doesn't do it. It needs the pipes that come with the bike. And of course for us, the most important thing, this is a big part in fact of our evil twin project. And I always love to look at how other people work on things. When you buy things and parts are in backwards, or the bolts, as you take the bolts out, some are really tight, some aren't tight at all, some are hand tight, some have washers, some don't. And it's not to criticize other people, you just think, well boy, I don't want to do that myself. Now the next part of this, as I'm looking at it, I got to get underneath it, and that's why I have it up off the ground like this. I got to get underneath there and separate it. It separates into various pieces. There's a bunch of clamps and little screws, and then pretty much from that point on it all comes off. And believe me, without this quartz heater, you couldn't work out here today. Your hands would be sticking to the parts. So this is another good investment, a quartz heater, infrared. With the exhaust system totally hanging free, rather than try to slide it out all in one piece, which is really awkward, if I take all the clamps off in the back, the unit separates and just makes it a little bit easier. And since I'm going to be deconstructing it anyway for polishing, I may as well take it apart and make it easy on myself. Now anybody that's ever done this knows if you have a helper or an octopus, it's a lot easier than doing it this way. As you take it apart, it comes apart, of course, but it is it's amazing when you have a helper how easy these things are, and when you're working all alone and it's 22 degrees outside, changes everything. Now I can see how there's plenty of rust, plenty of grease, plenty of corrosion. Usually there's plenty of everything that needs to be restored. But here's the big issue here. If I left this out in the garage, and who knows in how many years it would take, there'd be even more rust. If I take it and do the polish, cleanup, and waxing now, I have a part in inventory that it's gonna serve me well in the years to come. Or if I just want to swap the exhaust system out. Now the exhausts are different, and I did have to make a carbon fiber bracket to adapt it, but I don't know. Until I ride it both ways, I'm not going to know. But I want to have this in storage and have it all polished up, and we will do that in the next couple of days, of course. I wanted to make a suggestion on these. This is a 37-year-old bike. And yes, it hasn't rusted through at all, but there's a lot of rust on it. So I'm going to take the covers off, and I'm sure these will polish up, and this will wire brush up in here. But here was my suggestion. It's something I've done for all the time that I've had these bikes, and why my exhaust system doesn't look like this, is what I would do if I put the bike in storage. I wasn't going to ride it all winter. I'd just take and spray WD-40 or some kind of spray oil over the whole thing, and it would keep this from happening. And now you're looking at, you know, a $500 or $700 set of pipes that, depending on if you can get them, and you know, to have a spare. Not only to have a nice pair that's on the bike, but to have a spare. And it'll be a separate video, but I will wire brush these up in the future and polish them on a separate video. They'll look a lot better than they did now. Now the guy I bought this bike from said he didn't ride it for several years, and that's why it was just sitting the way it was. But all he would have had to have done is, it doesn't even matter if you use motor oil on a rag. Just get some oil or some grease on it, especially if you're storing it in an unheated garage. And what happens if you store it, well, years later it'll look like that instead of a rust bucket. And again, 37 years old. Because this is part of what we're doing with the Evil Twin project, at the end of the video we have on polishing, this will be really a lot nicer, and I'm looking forward to I love having spare parts. And I've said this before, you can go and find bikes all over the place, dirt cheap, that have no title. And who knows, I won't speculate on why they don't have a title, but a spare bike if you have a 25-year-old bike, 30-year-old bike, having a spare bike, as Luciano says, it's a Christmas tree, and you come over and just take parts off. Then you also have a spare set of wheels, a spare set of tires, and in this case, as we're doing the Evil Twin project, we're building up a nice collection of restored spares. And while I have it up on a lift here, I'll get the steam cleaner out and steam clean underneath it. That'll just be, well, just for my own satisfaction when I put it back into storage. And of course I have blocked off the exhaust so spiders don't build a nest in there or whatever. While this is in storage. And the good news is now, even if we were to want to use the whole engine, rebuilding this engine, it needs a crankshaft. That's not really cost effective right now, but we stumble upon a bike without a title that has a running engine, we'll buy that too. And it's a funny thing, everybody I know that had a GS years ago and sold it wishes they had it back. Now, as this Evil Twin project moves forward, I don't know what the next step is going to be, but probably, especially if it snows in the next day or two, we'll spend a day cleaning that exhaust up and putting it in inventory. So while I'm waiting for the steam cleaner to build up a head of steam, I sprayed the whole bottom of this engine, anything I could get to conveniently. What I have are these rubber mats that, and I'll put down some old towels. When they're upside down, of course, I can just throw some old towels under there and mop that up later. Speaking about a handy tool that I seem to find more uses for every day. We bought this from Harbor Freight, and boy is it great on a day like today when you want to clean off some grit and grease. It definitely is a useful tool. In fact, we've done little videos on cleaning car wheels and things, but that is a handy tool. Well, all our hardware is ready for polishing. The parts are out in the driveway ready for polishing, but it's just not going to work today. And as always happens in my life, we get a little change of plan midday, and I'm just wondering how much effort's going to be. I'm sure it's going to be a lot. To clean this up, we will do that on a future video for sure. And I am really happy about getting that part of the Evil Twin project behind me. So hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.